Whitney, how are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. It's nice to have you live and in person here on the podcast.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm looking at you on the screen. So for those of you who are listening, we're recording Whitney as a video as well. So if you want to watch it on YouTube, you can see her there, but you can listen to us on the podcast as you are.
Thank you, Dominic.
Yeah. So I heard you spoke at the AWFS this year. That's a big thing.
Yes, I did.
Oh, good. So, hey, why don't you start by telling us who you are and why you were speaking at the AWFS?
Okay, sure. I'm Whitney Pyle. I'm the co-owner of Advanced Cabinet Systems and J.G. Bowers Incorporated and also Pybo Management. So I was speaking at AWFS because, as you can imagine, being a female owner in the construction industry and casework manufacturing industry is not all that common.
It's rare. Yeah.
I'm asked to speak at these events fairly regularly. A couple of years ago, I spoke at AWI National Conference, and then AWFS, and then the following year IWF, and then back to AWFS this year. So the message is one that I think people are interested in because it's not all that often that you find a woman woodworker or a woman contractor. So it's interesting. I think people like to get the perspective from someone who's not all that common in the industry.
Right. Yeah. Well, maybe you'll put some light on that, because I guess the question we're here to ask today is why?
Why?
Why is it a rarity? And you know what, if we dial the clock forward 20 years, is it still going to be a rarity? Is it still going to be something that's different or special about a company?
I think that's such a great question. I think why it's a rarity is there's so many avenues to answer that question. And there's so many reasons why it's a rarity. You can go back many, many years and simply culture. Women, young girls were not brought out into the garage by their dads or their grandparents to work on woodworking projects. Women were not brought out in the garages to learn how to build things. And the same thing probably goes with automotive and cars. Not very many men look to their daughters to come and help them change the oil in the car, those sorts of things. Obviously, times are changing, and women are being told more and more every day as young girls they can do anything that men can do. And that's probably a whole nother topic for discussion. But I think, why were there not very many women in these roles leading up to now? That's why. Just culturally, we weren't brought up that way. And I grew up in the Midwest, so we certainly have been a little bit behind the curveball in bringing young women into the industry. Futuristically, what do I think it's going to look like? I think there's no choice but that it looks different 20 years from now than it looks today. One of the things I spoke about at AWFS was the fact that if you survey just a population of contractors, of carpenters, and if you take 100% of the population of just carpenters, 1.8% of them are women, yet we make up 51% of the population of general humans. Women have a slight edge on the men right now.
Right.
So with us being 51% of the general population of human beings, it's only natural to know that we're going to have to make up a larger percentage of all of these different populations of people in work, regardless of what that is.
Wow.
And if not, people say there's a skilled labor shortage. That's going to continue to be the case if we can't utilize the entire population of people to do the work. It's not just going to miraculously change itself, right? We're going to have to make strides in that direction to change it.
So for people listening to the podcast, what I'm hearing you say, Whitney, and by the way, people listening to this podcast, it's very glamorous. They're walking their dog, right? Or they're on the treadmill, so they're either sweaty or holding a doggy poop bag in their hand. But for those of you who are holding a doggy poop bag in your hand, don't do this exercise. But if you cover your face, and cover your eye with one hand, that's all we're seeing of the population now. We're not opening both of our eyes to the total, we call it total addressable market. We're only appealing to the men And we're forgetting about the women in the workforce who could work for us.
Right, we are. And I think that it is already slowly progressing in a different direction. If you take into account cabinet makers and bench carpenters into that population of people, that number goes up to maybe 7%, somewhere between 7 and 8%. And that's according to the U.S. Department of Labor surveys and statistics. So I feel pretty confident that those numbers are accurate. And I research this stuff all the time. One, because I'm a nerd. I was a math and physics major in school, so I just think it's cool. But two, because it's the industry I care about so much. And everywhere you go, every conference I attend, people I speak to in the industry, every single person says the skilled labor shortage is such a huge problem. And I agree with them. Running companies that utilize skilled labor, I see it too.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a no-brainer. How do we fix that problem? Well, start using the entire population and not just half. So those things are happening anyways.
Right.
For many reasons, the influence that young girls are getting at school now, talking about STEM, all of those types of things. There's so many cool technologies out today that make it easier for women to do the job. Not that we need it to be easier,
right.
But realistically, my husband, for example, was a college football player, and he can easily lift something that's 50 plus pounds with no trouble. I might struggle a little bit, but there's so many technologies today that are advancing to make those problems a non-issue.
Right.
I think some of those problems are going to begin to solve themselves as far as getting the labor up to speed and in the market, but then keeping them there would be a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. And I think when we have this, whenever I have this conversation with people about, how do we hire and find the right people, we often think about just floor manufacturing.
Certainly.
Right? Working on moldings, they're not very heavy. One at a time, they're not very heavy. They might be long and awkward, but they're not heavy. But there's also other positions. So I like what you said earlier about, you haven't taken your kids out to the garage to talk about how to make something. Well, your daughter might really want to be a draftsperson. Maybe they're great artistically. So there's other opportunities within your company that you could be grooming or, opening up their eyes to doing other things in the company than just sweeping the floor or running the edge bander. It's not all just labor work. There's other types of things that our industry needs.
That's correct.
Right? All over the place. So for those of you listening, don't be shy about bringing your daughter or your niece or the next door neighbor's kids over to do some work in the shop or on the drawings, because kids are so good on computers now.
Oh, they're so great on computers. And that's, our local high schools, we have 3 local high schools that have an excellent CAD program. We hire people directly out of that program. So
From high school. That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. We run, AutoCAD in our companies, and we have on several occasions hired people who went through those CAD programs at their local high schools. They have enough knowledge and use behind them working through CAD that we can hire them and train them to do exactly what we need them to do. And that's when I hired into the company that I now own, the only women that worked there were accountants and bookkeepers and receptionists. Now we're about 50% women in our engineering staff. Our estimator, our chief estimator is a woman. We have women in production. There are so many things that we've been able to expand. And I think a lot of it has been in part just because of those kind of programs and that outreach that we do. So,
hey, just sort of sense of scale, because I've learned a little bit about your company, and obviously you spoke at AWFS, so people know you. But the people on the podcast are really all around the English-speaking world. Can you give me a head count, if you're comfortable doing that, on JG Bowers and Advanced Cabinet System? How big is the company we're talking about here?
Combined, we have 70-ish employees at the moment. We keep a contingent staff of around 10 to 15 at any given time.
Sure.
So,
yeah. So it's a sizable company.
And it's combined. I would like to think so. I would like to think so. Of course, we're smaller than we want to be, but everybody's working on growing, right?
Right. And then the people that you have on the production staff, or the women on the production staff, are they in install? Are they in finishing? Are they benchmen? Or, oh gosh, I guess we have to change that word. But are they, what positions do they have? You said estimating.
It's across the board. In production, we have women in our inventory and receiving. We have women in our custom countertops department, women in machining, women in assembly, women in custom, women in shipping, if I didn't already say that.
Yeah.
There's not a department that doesn't have a female in it.
So let me do this then, because you've already identified the problem, and I think anybody listening would understand that. If I say 100% of the conversations I have fall around having great people, I'm underestimating it a bit. Right? Right. We've got people, we don't have the right people. We need more people. We need the right people. I wish that guy would quit so we could replace him, whoever it is. But how did you guys go through the transition from not having women in production to having that? I think people would like to know the steps, maybe the simple steps they could take in their company to start moving down that path.
It's funny you ask that. I get that question all the time. And honestly, for us, it was very, very organic. It was as simple as me being a woman in the management positions. I think when I came to work there and there was no one who looked like me with in a technical role, no one who thought the same way as I did in a technical role, I felt very singled out. I was sometimes nervous to give my opinion because I knew it was going to be very different than my coworkers' opinions. And so when the opportunity to recruit for some of those positions came up, it was a no-brainer that I would be asking my peer group outside of work, do you know somebody? Right. Of course, some of those people happen to be female because my peer group has a lot of females in it. So for us, it was very organic. It was, I was, on the management team. I was the first woman in a technical role, I think, ever. And it was easy to grow it from there. There are other companies out there who I know, I've worked with alongside to kind of help them diversify their staff a bit. And it's been as simple as having that tough conversation sometimes with the executives and owners saying, you're looking for somebody who thinks like you and acts like you. Do you realize the limiting that you're doing to yourself by having this mold that you expect your employees to fit into? And so many times that it's been like an aha moment for that person. Right. And it's never meant, at least for me, to be, oh, look at what you're doing. It's that moment. Did you think about what it would be like maybe to not recruit somebody who looks like you, acts like you, talks like you, thinks like you? What do you think that might do to your staffing? What do you think that might do to your company? Yeah. Sometimes people just don't realize, and having that conversation is enough to make them think, oh, wow, I've been limiting myself. Let me branch out. And then it goes organically from there because they hire somebody who's different than them and they learn something from it, and it's interesting and it's exciting, and they grow a little bit, and then it makes sense to do that next.
So glance at your last company photo, and if it's just a bunch of 40-year-old white guys, you might be
add somebody new.
Worthy here, but you might want to add some new flavors to it.
Yes.
So here's something I hear when the doors are closed, because it's a real fear from the part of guys. You may or may not have heard this before, and I'm not breaking the guy code and saying this to you, but I think it's really important, is I hear the genuine concern, and I just wrote it down while you were talking, how will my guys react if we hire a woman on the floor? Have you heard that one before?
Yes, and it was definitely something that when we started working that way and doing things that way, that we had to have some tough conversations with ourselves. We had to look at our policies. We had to have tough conversations with some of the guys who worked there. And it's absolutely a concern. We'd be silly to think that it wasn't going to be a concern. And that's just it. You can't be fearful of confronting those things head on. If we don't confront those things head on, we're going to continue to work with 49% of the population only and continue to scratch our heads and wonder why there's a skilled labor shortage. Come on. We're doing ourselves a huge disservice. We're spending money in recruiting and administration and all of those things in some form or fashion anyway, teaching ourselves how to be able to recruit and retain the opposite sex or minorities or whatever that be, is going to be such a huge return on investment for people that if they just think about the money they're already spending and say, okay, let me reposition these dollars and spend them a little bit differently.
Right.
Going to be so excited about that return.
Yeah. It's just a huge overlooked opportunity if we're ignoring 50% of the population right off the bat. And I'm not saying that every woman wants to work in woodworking, but there are some who would love it.
Right. And they wouldn't even know that they would love it because they've never been exposed to it. They've never even been a thought about it.
Right.
And it's changing that culture. There's such a huge conversation that has to happen. But the fact of the matter is, if we're being forced to do it because there's such a huge labor shortage, then great. It doesn't really matter why we're having it. The fact we're having it is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess then the challenge I put to everybody is, if you're going to hire somebody new this year, hire the right person first. I have to say that. You have to hire the right person. Okay. But let's not be afraid to hire a woman, a female, if that's the right person.
Exactly.
If it makes me change as a company to change some policies or go to the guys and say, look, yeah, we're hiring a woman. Behave.
And there are so many skills that someone can be taught and learn just by simply having the exposure. And as women in this industry, I frequently have this conversation with the women who work in this industry. We have to be thick-skinned. We have to understand that there is an environment that we've not been a part of, and becoming a part of that environment might be a little bit difficult, but you've got to have boundaries. And if somebody crosses your boundaries, you've got to be willing to say, you crossed my boundary. You cannot assume that somebody knows anything about you. I just had an incident the other day at work where I came out on the floor, and one of our guys, he's newer, but he's an older guy, and I knew him previously, neighbors many, many years ago. And I walked out onto the floor and I said, hey, how's it going? How's your day? And he said, I really hope this doesn't offend you. And I thought, oh boy, what's coming? And he said, it's better now. It's just so nice to see your smiling face. You are so pretty. And I said, well, wow, thank you. That's so nice to hear. And he said, well, I really hope it doesn't offend you. But to think that we're walking around in a society where somebody is afraid to tell somebody else that they're pretty because it might offend them. Come on, we've got work to do.
Yeah.
And we are willing to, as women, if we get a compliment, you accept it. If somebody crosses a boundary, you tell them. I've been so blessed in my career as a whole. In my previous life, I was worked in an NRC role, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and then an FDA role for many, many years, working at companies that were regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. And I never really understood that there was such a huge difference between men and women in the workplace, because those companies and those industries that I worked in, if you had a brain and you had the skill and the technical skill, there was just no. They're far advanced in those areas. So coming here was a difference, and I had to learn. But I think that's really important that we learn it and we integrate ourselves. And there's so much fun stuff to do in this industry. The future's so bright, and so it's just going to be a real team effort between men and women and everyone in the industry to make it work.
This is great. So let me ask this. That I asked what the steps you took at your company were to get you to have more females there. And I think you being in a position, and you have an HR background too, right?
I do, yes.
So you're recruiting, you've got some recruiting skills as well that would help you pull people in and phrase it. Because people listening are saying, okay, I'm open to it. Yeah, let's do it. But there's no women applying to my jobs. Can you tell me how at the coal face, right? Like right at the place where I'm placing the ad or networking or something like that, what do I say to let people know, hey, our industry, our company is open to having women here? How do I do that?
So for us and for other companies that I've kind of advised down this path, it's recruit from places that you're not normally used to recruiting from. We, forever did Indeed ads or did hot jobs ads. And that's fallen off quite a bit. We do a lot of social media marketing for open positions. And, I don't know, most people probably have like a classifieds Facebook group in their areas. And there's consistently both men and women posting on those pages, hey, tell me who's got openings, who has job openings. I'm looking for a job. I'm never shy, and neither is the rest of my staff, at replying to those, whether it's male or female. Hey, we have these openings, come and apply. And it doesn't matter, how old you are, what your skill level is, we'll train you. Also, we started recruiting from unlikely places. If I went to a restaurant and noticed a person behind the counter who was on the line cooking, and they were, really doing a good job and engaged and had a positive attitude, and whether it's female or male, I would say to them, hey, here's my business card. Do you want to change your career? Call me.
Yeah.
And anywhere that I've ever gone that I've had a great experience with somebody who's working in the place that I am, male or female, I've done that. And so does my staff. They keep a stack of business cards with them when they're out and about and they're doing things. If they come across somebody in any role that's doing a great job, we recruit them. So of course, I'm not allowed in.
Right. Has the right attitude. That's what we're looking for, is attitude. Knowledge and skills can be trained. Absolutely. That's why it's in a book. I can't train you on attitude. I cannot influence the kitchen table you were brought up around. I can't do that. But I can tell what kind of kitchen table you were brought up around by your attitude. And that's what we're all looking for, is that unknowable piece. Absolutely. That's so true. And another thing that we do that's been very helpful is all of our local schools have a career day, or, bring your mom to work day, or bring your dad to work day or to school day, and talk about your career. And, we take advantage of those. Everybody on my staff goes to those types of things as much as they can. We participate in local career fairs. We run a program occasionally called My Shop, where we bring in local high schoolers and tell them about the business. Usually we have more boys show up in those, but there's always some girls as well. And just giving them that exposure and telling them about all the different career opportunities there that we have. And then seeing the females working throughout our facility. If you're a young girl and you see a female and she's the person in charge in a specific area, doing a very technical job, and she's the expert, that does a lot to show young girls, oh, wow, I could do that too, even though they weren't maybe brought up that way. So all those things that are kind of outside the box thinking, like I said, you're spending the money recruiting and training anyways. Think about it differently and spend the money differently. I'm not giving away any secrets, but I won't mention a company name. But one of my clients has recently found a lot of success in posting. They have a church bulletin board where you can post just regular low-key stuff. It's not selling, but they just put an ad up, now hiring. And I don't think they've taken the step about, saying open to men and women, but they're getting great responses from their local church. I think their church is pretty big. And I think that because apparently there's a traffic cop on the street directing traffic on Sundays. So I'm pretty sure it's a big congregation. But, they've got that low-key board there, and they're getting lots of people from that, which, kind of aligns with their values. And they're a very Christian organization, so that aligns with those things that are important to everybody working there. But it's the same thing. They've gone and found a way to communicate with people that they're open and needing team, and they're finding great results for that.
Excellent. Yeah.
The other one that's working is new immigrants to the country. So I talk to people throughout Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, etc. It's all English-speaking countries. My Italian's so bad that I don't bother, Italian. But the new immigrants are the refugees that are coming into the country. So there are lots of those. I hate to call it blocks of Syrians coming over, or blocks of people coming from the Eastern European countries. Well, marketing to those groups through the people who are here or whatever country, helping them get jobs is a great way to go, because those people so badly need a job. And when they get one, they'll do anything to keep it.
Right.
And we need that. That goes back to attitude, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's so important.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about physically. What did you need to change on the floor to make your, I'm talking about women's bathrooms or things that were physically needed in the shop to make it more friendly when females started working more and more in production?
So I think we were already set up ergonomically pretty well. The owner of the company before me decided that was really, really important and had an overhead crane lift system and things like that. A lot of conveyor systems, so people aren't carting around big, huge pieces and parts. So those things were already in place. I didn't have to do a lot there. Some of the other things that we're looking at futuristically is the exoskeleton. I don't know how many of your listeners know about that, but yeah, that is definitely if you have positions that are lots of repetitive motion, whether it be because you're thinking about hiring a female or you have a female in the position who needs some support, or just to take some of that load off of the men that are already doing the job. Those are fantastic investments, something I've learned about them recently. And I think those are going to show themselves to be invaluable in our industry over the next several years and in the future just coming. So luckily, we had a great system already. We've put more conveyors in place as we've expanded to try to keep the load off of our people. Some of the things that we do are really both men and women alike. We do for them. We have concrete floor, right? Who doesn't in a factory? But we, put in the ergonomic foot pads. So people are standing on the mats that are ergonomically designed to help them not bear so much weight on that concrete. And I would do that whether it's a man or a woman. Some of the policies, though, that's been a big one. And I shouldn't even say that we had to put any new policies in place. We didn't, other than the change in our recruiting policies. And that was nothing formal. It was just, we're going to recruit differently. We're going to look in different places. Mm-hmm. But we have started doing, as part of the onboarding process and within a person's first 90 days to 6 months, they are going through emotional intelligence training. We're doing leadership training with every employee, even if they're brand new in an entry-level position. They're still going through emotional intelligence training and leadership training. And then also we do a diversity class about once every year where we bring everybody in and just go over the basics of diversity and how you should be interacting with your coworkers, whether it be male, female, minority, someone with a disability. And so we put those things into place. But again, it's not a new investment. It's spending the dollars we're already spending a little bit differently.
Right. And you're running it like a business.
Yes.
Right? And so you've come from big business and the NRC, right? And then food laboratories or food manufacturing?
Food manufacturing. Well, both food and drug manufacturing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we're used to I come from telecommunications and banking, believe it or not. That seems like dogs years ago. But those things are normal for us to have that regular ongoing training that just brings, the training doesn't have to change the world. It's just reminders.
Right.
Periodically. And that's what changes thinking and cultures and attitudes. We do it for safety too, right? We remind people about safety at every toolbox talk. I hope. Hint. Yes. Everybody listening. Hint, hint. Right? We have to remind
definitely
people.
Do that.
So, and anybody who's laughing, think about how many times you have to remind your painters to wear their face masks. It's just constant reminders.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So you started mentioning policies. Was there anything else that you had to change? It's not that hard, is it? It's just being open to it, right?
Right. Absolutely. And for me, like I said, it was so organic and such a no-brainer. But that's easy for me, right? I'm female. So, but I have worked with some companies where I've gone in and they're all male and they're, like you said earlier, afraid. They're worried. It's really going to change our culture. It's really going to change how we interact with one another. And I'm sure it is. When you put a female in the men's locker room, all of a sudden things are a little different or a lot different. But I think the key thing to remember is that the reason that it's important to do it is because there's a need, whether it be a need for new ideas, new thought processes, somebody else to kind of check you. And just say, hey, wait a second, I'm coming about this from a different angle. Did you think about this? So for whatever reason, the return on investment from diversifying your staff is, I could cite 100 articles that show how important it is and what the return would be. And I probably should have brought my little slide and had it in the background. There's
Whitney, you know what? I don't think we need it. I could just ask the question, guys listening, how much can your wife or spouse get done in a day? And how much multitasking can she do? And imagine if those skills were unleashed on your company, right?
Right.
I mean, because women, men and women have different strengths, right? And as all people do. But imagine if those strengths really got harnessed inside your company to do the things you need to do, whether it's detail work, whether it's rough work, whether it's planning and project management, or whether it's installation. We need those things. And so the reason people listen to this podcast is because they're already trying to think 2 or 3 steps ahead. That's why I bring guests like you on, because you're out in the distance and you're calling us. You're saying, "Hey, come on this way. Try this path." I love it. I think it's great. Okay, if somebody wants to learn more or wants to talk to you privately about this, because I think there might be some people out there who are intrigued by your conversation, how would they get in touch with you?
So my consulting company that I run is Pybo Management, Pybo. The email address for that company is info@pybomanagement.com. I would be happy to answer any questions. I'm readily available on Instagram and Facebook and all of those places, LinkedIn. So anyone could reach out to me. I'm happy to have this conversation. It's obviously I'm passionate about it. I think there's so many wonderful things that women and minorities can bring to our industry. There's so much room for growth and so many exciting things coming up with technology changes and all those sorts of things. So I love it. I'm passionate about it.
I could tell.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Whitney, thank you so much for being with us. Those of you listening, please reach out. Whitney just mentioned her consulting company, but you run JGB and Advanced Cabinet Systems as well.
Yes.
I think I talked about multitasking a minute ago.
Right. Yeah. So I do, Advanced Cabinet Systems is our manufacturing firm. We make Division 6 and 12 casework. So I'm the COO of that operation, and I work and own these businesses. I could not do it without a stellar team, and I'm blessed to have the greatest team out there. I also am the COO at J.G. Bowers, Inc. J.G. Bowers, Inc. is actually the parent company for Advanced Cabinet Systems, but they do operate mostly independently of one another. It's great and it's so much fun. And then yes, the Pybo Management is the consulting company that I do that in my spare time, right? My free time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I'm sorry that I missed you at the AWFS, but I'm sure we'll meet face to face one day and have a chance to continue the conversation. Those of you listening, sure. It just, so nice and straightforward and clearly understands what's needed from a leadership perspective to change the way a company charts its path in the future, especially from this labor perspective. So if you have questions on that and you think you could have an interesting conversation with Whitney, please reach out to her. All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
For having me on your show, Dominic. I really appreciate it. It's a great opportunity to spread the message that I'm so excited about. So thanks again. And I look forward to getting some responses from people and seeing if there's anything that I could do to help and learning more from them. So
excellent. All right. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.